Air travel in the past was much better than what we have now. From the elegant fashion shows that happened on the plane to the gourmet meals economy passengers enjoyed, these iconic air travel perks would make you want to go back in time, especially when you experience the amazing legroom. The experience of flying back then was a lot more enjoyable and comfortable. As a passenger, you had a lot of legroom. And for those who don't understand, legroom is basically the amount of space you have to stretch your legs on a plane. It was an iconic and key feature back then, even in the economy class sections. Unlike today, where you are likely to struggle for leg space. Modern planes may be much more advanced and sophisticated than they were back then, but the people on the flight didn't feel any discomfort. They didn't feel like they were being squeezed or cramped into small, tiny corners. And that's because the distance between the seats, technically called seat pitch, was much larger. It usually ranged from 36 to 40 inches, unlike today, when most planes only get you about 28 inches. You could stretch yourself, move around easily, and not feel stuck in a tiny space for the entire flight. This shows that the philosophy of taking a flight then was that it must be a luxury experience. It wasn't just about moving some people from one place to the other. It was something special, something to enjoy, something to relax you. That level of comfort can't even be found in many first-class portions of some airplanes today. Now, on to the next, gourmet meals. Now, if you fly first class nowadays, you are guaranteed to have gourmet meals served to you. The difference is that in the past, you didn't need the most expensive ticket before you could eat something really high-end. The meals weren't just simple snacks or regular, overfamiliar meals like McDonald's. The passengers were treated to different courses of meals, the kind of experience you'd only get if you booked a first-class ticket or went to a high-end restaurant. As a passenger, you would likely be served a delicious plate of roast beef or turkey carved right before you. And you could bet, not merely from the aroma, that you were about to wolf down some of the most delicious things you've ever seen, but also from the fact that it was prepared by a skilled chef or several skilled chefs who were meticulous about giving you the best experience. To add to that, everything was laid out on fine china with real silverware. The Olympic Airways even leveled up their game by providing gold-plated cutlery in their first-class cabins. Really, really top experience. Number 8. Fashion show. Today, you might see people wearing pajamas or other casual clothes on a plane, but back then, the clothing choices were more elegant, almost like everyone was part of some fashion show. Typically, men wore suits and ties, and women wore elegant dresses and hats. But besides the passengers, the people who made the flying experience truly fashionable were the flight attendants, or stewardesses as they're sometimes called. Their uniforms were designed by top fashion houses like Christian Dior and Chanel, and there was a general air of elegance and sophistication on flight. In fact, some airlines were so pleased by the fashionable appearance of flying that they leveled up their game and began hosting fashion shows right in the aisles. Beautiful models were hired to walk down the aisle while displaying the latest trends and designs. It was a truly unforgettable experience then, and people looked forward to flying with a lot of excitement. The idea of dressing up for a flight may seem unimaginable today. Still, like piano lounges, the next feature from this era, it was an iconic part of air travel back then, making it enjoyable and truly memorable. Number 7. Piano lounges. Some airplanes then had piano lounges. That means you could enjoy the live piano music while flying through the clouds, whether it was Beethoven or Mozart. Piano lounges were usually a feature in first-class sections of planes that had them. Since most affluent people enjoyed the piano then, it was deemed fit to design luxury lounges with cocktail bars and piano lounges. People would come there to relax, interact, and enjoy a drink while listening to live music at the same time. The pianos used were not the regular grand pianos. They were mostly electric pianos or organs. But regardless of which type they used, they still served a function that people enjoyed. Later, particularly on American Airlines, pianos were introduced into the economy class sections. Live piano music became something both the rich and the poor could enjoy. The idea of having a piano lounge on a plane was later scrapped to cut costs and improve efficiency. That's why it's non-existent nowadays. But regardless, it was an iconic feature of the old era, just like air stairs. Before jet bridges were invented, passengers usually disembarked from the plane using air stairs. Air stairs were inbuilt, mobile stairways that allowed people to board and alight. As simple as this feature was, it allowed passengers to step directly onto the tarmac, which also gave them the sense that they were important celebrities. Air stairs were standard on many aircraft, including the Boeing 727 and the McDonnell Douglas DC-9. Many had seen on television how famous personalities descended from a plane through the air stairs, and living that experience was really memorable. The experience of walking down the stairs while waving to onlookers was a dream for many, but a reality for those who were not too poor to afford it. In the history of aviation, air stairs have also played a significant role. The infamous hijacker D.B. Cooper used the rear air stairs of a Boeing 727 to make his daring escape. He parachuted into the night and left behind one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in aviation. Because jet bridges are now widely used, air stairs have become a rarity. Regardless, they remain an iconic part of a bygone era. Can we say the next iconic feature still remains to this day? This brings us to the fifth iconic feature: architecture. Architecture was an iconic, although often underrated, feature of the golden age of air. Yes, airplanes served the functions they were meant to carry passengers from one place to another. But besides and beyond that function, the design of airplanes was stunning and exciting all at once. The Boeing 747, which was introduced in 1979, was, for example, more than just a large aircraft. It was designed to evoke wonder and marvel. The plane had a spiral staircase connecting its two stories, evoking a sense of elegance and luxury, especially for those inside it. Besides, it could hold up to 500 passengers, a rarity even in modern times. However, the architectural features of the golden age of air travel weren't just about the design of the plane, but also how airports were built. Perhaps the most iconic example of this is the TWA terminal at JFK Airport, which was designed by Eero Saarinen. The terminal was built like a bird in flight, symbolic of the spirit of aviation itself. The terminal's sweeping curves and open spaces made it a true delight of its time. Now, let's talk about flight engineers. Flight engineers, also known as air engineers, were essential to aviation in the golden age of air travel. They were almost as important as pilots. They were tasked with managing an airplane's internal systems. Since airplanes then weren't as sophisticated as they are nowadays, this compulsion to have flight engineers made the utmost sense. The engineers themselves were always on alert and had a special control panel filled with dials, switches, and gauges, which they used to monitor the engines, fuel systems, and other critical components of the aircraft. Although their roles differed from those of the pilot, they worked hand in hand with them, especially during takeoff and landing, to ensure everything went smoothly. Their expertise could not be sidelined, especially on larger planes that relied heavily on their knowledge to fly safely. In fact, for years, no large aircraft could fly without at least one skilled flight engineer on board. But with technological advancement, the tasks of flight engineers were gradually replaced by intelligent computers and sophisticated automated systems that monitor and control many of the functions flight engineers used to manage manually. Technology has advanced so much that Northwest Airlines was the last U.S. airline to employ flight engineers. In 2009, Northwest Airlines retired its final planes with flight engineer stations. On to the third iconic feature. Number 3. Postcards. During the golden era of air travel, there was the opportunity to send postcards. Airlines provided passengers with special postcards during flights. Passengers would write messages on them, talking about their travel experiences, or simply sending greetings to the recipient. Now, of course, it's a lot easier to communicate with anyone with one's phone. But for a time, when phones were not readily available, this was a really inventive approach to communication. After landing, postcards were mailed to friends and family from around the world. It was a really interesting tradition, and people cherished the idea of postcards because they could share their travel experiences with those who were not on the flight. Nowadays, these in-flight postcards are considered rare collectibles. The tradition of sending postcards may have faded today, but for those who experienced it, it remains an iconic feature of air travel back then. Number 2. Security. Back then, getting on a plane was as simple as taking a taxi or boarding a bus. Security checks in the airports were a lot more relaxed, and the process of flying was quicker and easier than it is today. Unlike today, during that time, passengers did not have to arrive hours before their flight. They didn't have to take off their shoes or worry about the amount of liquid in their carry-on bags. The process of flying felt casual and stress-free. In fact, back then, in the golden era of air travel, the idea of introducing metal detectors and other security measures that are now implemented today was considered abhorrent. There was concern that passengers might feel their privacy was being invaded, and they decided against implementing these measures. Well, that was until 159 aircraft were hijacked from May 1961 to the end of 1972, and they saw that these security measures could no longer be sidelined. New Orleans International Airport was the first airport to use metal detectors. Others quickly adopted that change, and aviation security has since remained a mainstay. But just as security measures were relaxed then, so was the law surrounding certain actions, like smoking, which leads us to the #1 feature on this list. As strange as it may sound to modern ears, smoking was a pretty much normalized routine in the golden age of air travel. Although there were designated smoking areas on many flights, it was still deemed okay to smoke right on one seat, and the cabin air was often filled with smoke. One of the reasons why smoking was permitted was because the health dangers associated with smoking weren't as widely understood as it is today. And it was not unusual for a flight attendant or stewardess to hand out cigarettes to passengers as part of the service. Enjoying a smoke was as normal as sipping a cocktail. But as it became more evident that smoking posed severe health implications, regulations were introduced to limit and eventually ban smoking on air. The last U.S. flight that allowed smoking took off in 2000, and it marked the end of a significant era. Overall, the golden era of air travel differed significantly from air travel in the 21st century. Security measures were a lot more relaxed, at least for a while. Smoking and other indulgences like piano lounges were allowed, and overall, it was a stunningly beautiful and elegant experience. Which of these iconic features would you like to see restored into modern air travels? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below.